So I'd like to introduce Dr. Julie Beadle-Brown, who's the professor at the University of Kent, England. She's done some amazing work on training, as Mark has mentioned. So Dr. Julie, are you there?
I'm here. Hello, everybody. Mark, is it okay if I share my presentation? It should do the subtitling.
Wonderful. Absolutely, Dr. Julie. Feel free.
Let me just make it work. Okay, hopefully you can see my presentation now, and all being well, some subtitles. Yes, okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to join with you. I was going to say this evening because it's this evening in the UK. Obviously it's lunchtime with you there in California. So Kevin asked me to say a little bit about the importance of training and linking it in with what he said. Kevin, having listened to you, I've been amending as I go. So what I sent you earlier is not quite what I have amended slightly my presentation from what I sent you earlier. But just to kind of go back perhaps a little step from sort of before we mention the training, and to say a little bit very briefly about what research has told us is needed for better, and the phrase that we often use in the UK is quality of life, but it's essentially the same. It's way of life. It's how people live their lives, the opportunities they have, the things they get involved in, whether they have choice and control, etc. And over 50 years worth of research, we know that one really important thing, which is an ordinary home dispersed in the community, is necessary, but not on its own sufficient to bring about a better quality of life or to bring about access to opportunities for individuals. We also know that having enough resources, and in most cases for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, that means staff, is needed. And actually, we know that we need enough, but not too many. We know that we can add lots of staff and make absolutely no differences to people's life, to people's quality of life, if they're not doing things in the right way. We know that ways of working such as person-centered planning, person-centered thinking, and even person-centered funding, like individual funding, personal budgets, direct payments type of arrangements, those are all very important, especially for choice and control, but are not, again, enough on their own, especially if people have more severe or complex needs in that sense. So over the years, actually, really interestingly, only 2 things have ever shown in the research as consistently important for delivering good outcomes for individuals in terms of quality of life and their that has been their own level of functional skills or the severity of disability, but also the nature and quality of the support provided. Yeah. So in other words, how people are supported, and that support essentially needs to be compensating for the severity or complexity of people's needs to help people to access their opportunities available to them. So what has research and practice shown that support looks like? What does it, what do we know about that? Well, we know that the support is a type of support that is about enabling people, and we use the word enabling, and it's about enabling people to participate in all aspects of their life, in their home and in their community. Enabling is about doing with people, not for or to people. And in the work that we do, we refer to the phrase, every moment has potential. Every moment has potential for people to participate, to interact with others, to learn something, to try something new, to learned last week, to sort of get some experience with which to make a choice in the future, kind of thing. The other thing that we know is that support provides just enough help and support for the person in that activity at that time to ensure success. We refer to this as graded assistance. It's support that works at the pace and with the preferences, interests, and agendas of the individual. In other words, person-centered in that sense. It's support that maximizes real choice and control every minute of every day, not just the big decisions like where do you live or do you have a job. It maximizes choice and control, as in which way round do you want to do the shopping? Which aisle do you want to go up the supermarket first, for example. And it's support that can offer this support and provide these opportunities irrespective of the level of intellectual disability or the presence of any additional or complex needs. In other words, nobody is too disabled, too autistic, too difficult, to anything to have a better quality of life. However, they may need more skills support to be able to access the opportunities. And we refer to this as person-centered active support. Okay. So an active support, these pictures just provide a brief, a kind of overview in the sense of it's about warm interactions and skill support for people to be actively involved in everything that they do. So on to training. What do we need to make support like active, that looks like active support happen? Sometimes this is the way of working that we find in services without them having to do anything. Staff just naturally work in this way. But actually, I've written it's not always the case. Actually, to be honest, it's rarely the case without intervention or without support for staff. The research that we've done over the years has told us that only around 1/5 to 1/3 of people accessing services where they are having supported accommodation type services, including those in supported living. So, and even those in an individualized service, not living with anybody else, just in their home, in their own, they don't receive that support very often without something happening. And what we know is that in order to make it happen, we need two things. We need the people who are providing the support, whether that's paid staff, paid carers, whether that's a family member, whether it's in a school and it's a teacher, but people need to have both the skills to work in this way and the motivation to do so. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I've just realized that my slide didn't move forward. I'm really sorry. This is the slide. The skills and the motivation to do so. Okay. So the importance for training. Obviously, there's an important point here that in terms of the bill and in terms of developing any system that's about measuring quality. And it's a methodological point, which is why training is really important to think about at this point as well. That if you're going to develop good measures of quality, you have to test it in a range of services, which must include really good services. You have to have a whole range of services if you're going to know whether your measures work. And therefore we have to invest very early on in ways of ensuring that you have, sort of the very good end of the quality spectrum, if you like, in order to use and develop any measures. Training for frontline supporters, we generally have found in research that if people have had training in active support, that this becomes a foundation for anything else that they do. That they can build on this with other elements. when we're working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, the staff, anybody providing support, might also need training in, for example, understanding and supporting people who are on the autism spectrum, supporting communication and decision making, maybe even understanding behaviors that challenge and what we might call positive behavior support, or ways of working with individuals in that sense. So they may need other elements of training as well. So training becomes, having the right curriculum of training becomes really important. But training is not just for frontline staff or for those who are direct support workers or direct support personnel in services going into people's homes. Actually, there's a range of support that we know staff need in order to be able to do this well. And that includes what we call practice leadership. So that includes having somebody who is able to provide ongoing mentoring, modeling, coaching, supervision, etc. And they also have to be knowledgeable and be able to work in this way in order to guide and support staff to do that. However, I mentioned on the previous slide about motivation. And actually, it's really important that senior managers and funders and commissioners have at least a basic awareness of what good really looks like and what their role is in making it happen. It's about getting the motivational structures correct. If for example, the measure of quality is how many activities have been ticked on a sheet, what you will often find is that staff get really good at completing pieces of paper with ticks. Yeah. If people realize that actually there's more to it and that they're really interested in how that the support is provided, the quality of support, the relationships and the rapport, for example, and that message comes from senior management and from outside of the organization, then you're much more likely to have success. And finally, of course, those who are responsible for checking quality need to have training so that they know what good looks like and what they should expect to see if those providing support have been given the skills they need. One little example from the UK was that for many years, and even now it could be a lot better, but our inspectors in our registration and inspection body have never, they never have really used, they go into services, they visit services, they might talk to people who can talk, they might talk to staff, but they don't always spend time watching and thinking about what's going on. And sometimes they will make a lot of excuses that, oh, well, that person's got very severe disabilities. They can't do anything. They can't be involved. You know, it's okay for staff to just leave them. Or I've even seen people write not appropriate on a report against activities for somebody with profound and multiple disabilities, for example. So it's really important that whoever's looking at quality knows what to look at and look for in that respect. So how can training be delivered? Because obviously, as Kevin said, this could be an awful lot of people needing training. And of course, there are many elements of the training that can be delivered through e-learning and online methods, but which we can also make interactive. Although the interaction is always much better if we have the luxury of being able to have people face to face. But it's still really possible to do that. And we can make training available to many different supporters to ensure consistency across different environments when we use those types of methods. Yeah. And just as an illustration, I was asked to mention some of the work that we do, for example. So I don't know if you know what MOOC stands for, but it's basically a massive kind of online learning kind of course, and we have one on autism, and it trains between 10 and 15,000 people on each go, and we have trained almost 110,000 people in less than 4 years, running just 2 courses a year, and people are across 150 countries. Yeah. People say it changed how they think, it changed how they think about autism, their views, their attitudes, and how they work with people. And so we know that it's possible to deliver really powerful training in that sense. In addition, we've already trained almost 500 staff in California on the principles on the introduction to active support, plus several thousand other staff, either directly or through those we train as trainers across different parts of the world. And materials on things like active support and understanding autism already exist in electronic format at different levels. It would be relatively easy to create a Californian version effectively for use. And also other elements of training are also being currently developed around, for example, training frontline managers to be practice leaders. So there's lots of materials out there. However, it is really important to note, and this is a kind of key point to finish on, that just giving people online training is not enough, and therefore investment has to be made in creating a system whereby staff can have the option, can have the possibility of coaching and modeling and training in situ. We know that very frequently staff need help to take the concepts and the ideas that they hear or read about in training and turn them into reality for the people that they support. And therefore we have to think about training, for example, excuse me, a network of local mentors and coaches to support staff development and improvement over time. And also think about supporting the local mentors and coaches in a form of a network to keep their practice up to speed and fresh over time and consistent. And also things like establishing a community of practice among senior managers, funders of services, etc., so that the good practices and the awareness stays at a high level. Okay. So the last thing that Kevin asked me to speak about was something about the sorts of things we have to think about in terms of the costs associated with training in these types of approaches. Now, obviously, there is a cost around curriculum development and the development or adaptation of high quality resources. You want something that's going to work well, make it easy for people to use, and sort of have the technology with it that will make it work if you're going to use, for example, online platforms as part of a way of delivering training. There is also a cost of consulting stakeholders about the curriculum and the materials, and this is really very important. People themselves who are using services, as well as obviously other stakeholders. Ensuring and maintaining a reliable platform on which to situate e-learning resources. This is extremely important. So having somewhere where the resources can sit and be well maintained and updated as time goes on is really important. We have to cost in, for example, facilitators for the interactive elements of online training. Who's going to feed back if they have a discussion on a forum? Who's going to make and give views and experiences for people to share, etc. The cost of training and providing ongoing support to a network of local coaches and mentors. So training people up, enough people up, and over time. And then, of course, there's costs like the release of staff to complete the training. It is actually really important that everyone does the training. This is often about changing hearts and minds as well as giving skills. And we know that what we sometimes call the cascade model, where you train one person and expect them to go back to a team and kind of tell everybody else what it was about, it doesn't work. This is something that every member of staff has to experience and participate in order for that to happen. And of course, then there would be the other cost of releasing those chosen and trained as coaches and mentors to provide the in-situ training and ongoing support to staff and those in practice leadership positions. So there would be a kind of a second set of release costs for that. So I hope that covers all the things that people had hoped that I would cover. Very happy at the end if there's any questions or anything that people would like to ask. Okay, thank you.